We lost a legend in the horror community, Tony Todd.
Be my victim. I'll see you soon.
All right, my fault on that. I had the stream opened as well, so you could hear like a bunch of like audio. My bad, my bad. But I did my best. So
Oh.
Tony Todd, me personally, obviously Candyman is his most iconic role for me. I remember watching, I think it was a DVD that I rented called the Boogeyman compilation that a lot of people have a nostalgia for. And I'll never forget the scene in the parking lot with Helen and Candyman. That absolutely terrified me. Just his voice, it's so chilling, haunting, but elegant.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that that was Tony Todd's best performance, but I do enjoy him a lot in the 1990 Night of the Living Dead remake. And I'll show that tribute video later again because I kind of flubbed that up. But what do you guys feel like? What is his best role in your opinion?
I was gonna say, unless you want to take the floor first, I can go. But
Go right ahead.
so yeah, my first introduction to the character, I remember, or at least the actor himself, Tony Todd. Rest in peace. But I remember him obviously from uh, it was the Final Destination franchise, which overall I have my mixed opinions on. But like, I think he was one of the highlights of that film. Just his eerie presence and how he seemed to have a lot of connections with death and whatnot. And of course, I think also when I eventually saw the Tom Savini Night of the Living Dead, which I thought was fantastic. That was actually my second movie I saw him in. Well, maybe that or probably Hatchet. I think it was probably like the 1990 Night of the Living Dead. Loved him in that one. I thought loved him as Ben. And it wasn't until like I think 2 or 3 years ago that I actually saw Candyman for the first time because I was actually I was watching it in anticipation for seeing the 2021 continuation, and I did also see the two sequels beforehand. Yeah, but yeah, no, Tony Todd, like obviously, I think he'll be most remembered as Candyman, but I think overall he just seemed like a humble individual, and I also just think that his roles, he just strike that perfect balance between being eerie, but also having like this charming gravitas to his voice, and yeah, absolute legend. It's sad to see him go so early.
Yeah, for me, my first introduction to Tony Todd was I didn't really know about this until I was looking up his work. He was like the Fallen in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Like he was the voice of like the big villain in that film, and I remember as a kid like having like the toy and everything, and it's just like you know in a weird way like a horror icon was voicing him. Like, I mean, it's kind of a rough film, but like a really cool villain that wasn't fleshed out that much, but still, uh, obviously, he's a lot more impactful and memorable in the Candyman series and stuff. But yeah, it was just really interesting. Like, I mean, such an iconic voice, and I guess with like the editing that they do with like the way that they talk and everything, and making it sound like more robotic and stuff, it was kind of lost on me until like I read it. I was like, okay, interesting, pretty cool. But yeah, it was I don't know, just brought back a lot of childhood memories, which is hopefully if anything to Tony Todd, nice because a lot of good times back then.
You mentioned the Candyman sequels. I think I've seen bits and pieces of them, and
Mm.
I know that they obviously a lot of people don't enjoy them or don't look at them the same way as they do the original film, which I really adore. I think
Yeah.
that film is amazing. But one thing can be said: Tony Todd's performance, to me, in all those films, even from the bits and pieces I do remember, is fantastic. Like you mentioned, Jeremy, his voice, it's so unique. He even voiced Venom in, the new Spider-Man 2, which I thought was really cool. I think that is perfect casting there for that, which I've yet to play, but, excited for that.
I was gonna say I haven't even heard the voice in the game. I'm curious myself, but
Yeah, I mean, from what I heard, I was like, dude, this is fucking awesome. I mean, he has such a unique voice anyway. And for him to play that character, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, the only time I've heard Venom talk in that game was like the teaser trailer, like the announcement trailer, and like that growl, like
Yes.
it's freaking sick.
yeah.
Also, it's kind of a deep cut, kind of, but Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, he voiced Darkseid.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Definitely on the voice acting end. From what I've seen here, I had his filmography pulled up. Star Trek, he was in some of the X-File episodes, even if it's just one. He was in that. CSI Miami. He was in a lot of TV shows, a lot of just movies, and everything I heard from like fans interacting with him in conventions have been so positive. And his peers and, people he's worked with throughout the years, I've never heard a bad thing said about Tony Todd. So a legend in the horror community and probably other communities out there, because he's, had such a vast, line of work. And he will definitely be missed, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. If I was to add on to that, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I was like watching some Candyman, I was like watching some interviews like leading up to this again, and I remember I came across one that I saw like a long time ago, but rewatched it again because it was a nice memory. In regards to like being nice to his fans, also his coworkers, he was extremely courteous to. If anyone knows about the moment in the original Candyman, like where like Helen, she's like leaning against like the bathroom mirror, right? And there's that iconic scene like where like all of a sudden the hook hand just comes through the wall and she's like not expecting it. That was a genuine reaction on Virginia Madsen's part. And then like, I think because like the director wanted that to happen because he wanted it to feel more natural and feel like actually make it scare her more effectively. And then I remember he actually said that Virginia had said that Tony actually came in and personally apologized to her because she just didn't know. And that just goes to show like how even though it was just a harmless prank, it's still, he still had the courtesy to tell her that he was sorry.
A true gentleman.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Okay. That was pretty quick, but I mean, I think we said basically all we need to say about Tony Todd. Again, a legend. He's going to be sorely missed, loved by many people, basically everybody. And that's a hard thing to do. So a genuine soul gone too soon. The next thing that we're going to move on to is Halloween, the franchise. And we're going to go into another topic, but the Blumhouse trilogy, it ended pretty controversial. And I say that because of Halloween Ends. As you can see here, the Rotten Tomatoes score, 40%. I think the audience here is 57% is what it looks like. It ended. Laurie kind of had her closure. Me personally, I thought it was okay. I don't love the film. I don't hate the film. It is a polarizing film. And, a lot of people have their opinion on it. I've seen people praise the film, and I've seen people say it is their least favorite Halloween film of the entire franchise. And I'd like to get your opinion on that.
Okay. I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. Let me go first. So, if I can give some brief context to my fandom as a Halloween fan, I recently just reviewed every single movie for the first time because, I just watched them for the first time not too long ago. I've watched separate Halloween films throughout my lifetime. I remember the first Halloween film I ever saw was the original Halloween 2. Saw it back 2007, 2008. I think roughly around the same time that the Rob Zombie films were coming out. I went to Blockbuster, wanted to get the movie, the original Halloween, but it wasn't there, so I watched Halloween 2. And I've seen the Rob Zombie films, and then eventually I went and saw the new trilogy with my brother, and we both liked it. We both liked it quite a bit, and I admit that I came away watching the trilogy fairly mixed overall, but I definitely remember Ends sticking out to me the most just because it was definitely the most unique one in the series. I definitely understand why people don't like it, but at the same time, the movie has its defenders, and it has its fans. I'm somewhere in the mixed on it. I admit that I liked it more the first time I saw it, but as time went on, I've certainly come around to ideas on why people think the way that it is, and how it's flawed in its aspects. But overall, I don't hate the film. I do think it's a bit too strongly disliked, but at the same time, I can understand people's criticisms towards it. But yeah, it's an overall mixed bag for me. Don't hate it, don't love it either. So
Yeah, kind of in the same boat with you there. I remember watching it for the first time, the day that it dropped on Peacock, right? And I watched it, and then our friend Jordan was wanting to watch it too. He's like, "Hey, you want to watch this?" And so I kind of watched it back to back. And the first time, by myself, just watching it, I was just so taken aback with some things, like Michael staring into Corey's eyes, and like that whole transference of whatever happened there in the sewers and everything, and I don't know, it was just so weird. That's kind of how I felt about it. I was like, this is weird. And then I was also kind of like, oh man, I can't wait for Jordan to watch this. And I watched it again with him, and I'm like, I actually kind of like this. And I don't know, it's definitely flawed. I feel like when a corporation takes over anything, and it's not in the hands of the original creator and stuff, you're always going to have a mixed bag on your hands, and studio interference and all that stuff. But I really enjoy a lot of the themes in that film. I wish the premise and everything would have been set up in prior films and would have been a little bit more cohesive, but as just a standalone film, I can't help but have fun with it. But I definitely see its flaws, and I do wish it was better, but I will not lie and say I didn't like it, because I do like it. But yeah, I think it kind of has a worse reputation than it should have. But in the same sense, yeah, I get why a lot of people are kind of like me the first time, that's just weird, it's no. So
yeah.
Well, I'm going to add a little bit more. The thing for me that was the most jarring about Halloween Ends was how Halloween Kills ended, and that setup where, if you know, you know. It's not too old of a film, but something happens. It's set up to where, oh yeah, Laurie's definitely going to come face to face with Michael. Then there's a huge time skip. And I feel like if they may have introduced the character of Corey Cunningham earlier than the very last film, maybe people would have been a little bit more open-minded and more accepting of him. I personally didn't mind him. I really liked the story, actually. But as a ending to a trilogy, I was disappointed. But I have to say two things. Okay. One, James Drew Courtney is Michael. I mean, come on. He is fantastic.
I would agree. Yeah.
And to me, in all the films, fantastic soundtracks. I mean, and kills too. I have to say the kills are really good in all three films, in my opinion. So,
I even loved the opening pumpkin intros. I mean, you have
Oh, yes.
sorry to interrupt, Chris, but
No, you're fine.
If you look at each individual film, you have 2018 with the idea that the pumpkin is kind of growing back, and it has this kind of very high intense and octane intensity to it, because it's the revival of the character. Then you have Kills with the more somber and almost sinister piano track, which was pretty cool enough. Of course, you have the pumpkins burning, and then of course you have Halloween Ends, I think, with the pumpkins they're slowly zooming into one, and they burst out through another one, which implies obviously the birth of a new Michael Myers. But yeah, like I said, I think the trilogy overall, it does some things that are really damn good. But
oh yeah,
it's I don't know where I was going with that, but
I think it's funny how in the first one, Halloween 2018, The main criticism that I've heard is Dr. Sartain, which I don't like that character very much myself. Halloween Kills, it's the evil dies tonight, the dialogue, shove it in your face, And then Ends is obviously Corey Cunningham and the lack of Michael for people.
Yeah.
The advertisement on, Halloween Ends, I have to agree with some people, man. I was expecting something different, something a little more on the vein of Halloween 20 years later, which I can kind of segue this
Freaking
into.
cage match with like Laurie and
Yes,
Michael.
which I think is a fantastic ending, and this leads me to the topic that I was trying to get to here. I'm gonna segue into this, and that is, if you'll load for me here, about Jamie Lee Curtis possibly returning to the Halloween franchise. Now you have, to me, multiple endings for the character of Laurie Strode. You have Halloween 2, if you're fine with the first two Halloween films. She rides off into the sunset in an ambulance, but still, she's alive.
Sunrise,
You have
but
20 years later. Jeremy, I'm going to get you. 20 years later, he gets his head chopped cleanly off, which somebody stated like 18 times in the comments of my video, which I thought was funny. It's like, yes, I know his head's off. And then Halloween Ends, You get 3 definitive endings. I don't count Resurrection, which hopefully nobody really does. But you have 3 definitive endings for that character. Does she really need to come back? Me personally, I think she's paid her dues. Jamie Lee Curtis probably should just let it go. I mean, she has given us more than enough. I mean, she come back, what? I mean, how long has she been doing this? 78, the late 90s. She come back in, 2018. I mean, people are eventually going to get tired, if they're not already tired, of the story of Laurie Strode. And I think it's time to create new characters, new ideas, and do something fresh and creative and inventive with the Halloween, series as a whole. The TV show or a new movie, wherever you're going with it, I feel like it has to be different or approached at a different angle than what we've seen before, in my opinion. So, what do you guys think about that?
You want to take this one first, or?
Yeah, I'll go first.
All right.
Yeah, I feel like she's paid her dues. I really don't want to see Laurie like roll up in a wheelchair with a shotgun in her lap, be like, "I'm here to get Michael."
Or like a walking cane. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. Just let her have her 3 victories over Michael, and let's like you said, Chris, new characters, some new stories, new ideas, and see what works with that. Because if you keep just like going back to good versus evil, but it's the same final girl, like Laurie, and like bless her heart, like Jamie Lee Curtis, like she's not getting any younger. Like I don't. It's kind of like what Bruce Campbell said, like after Ash versus Evil Dead ended, he's like he's retired from that role, like live action wise, because he didn't want to get to a point where it looks ridiculous that he's in action scenes, fighting evil and stuff. Like he didn't want
Oh yeah, right.
He didn't want evil. He didn't want himself to like look funny in the role. So I kind of feel the same way with Laurie. Like she's had her time, and it's time for someone else to kind of get a shot at Michael.
Yeah. So I guess now it's my turn. All right. So yeah, I feel like I have. I don't feel like my opinion will be too far away from your guys' opinion either. After seeing the entire saga as it is now, like the originals all the way up to the new trilogy, I think that Laurie she's had her time. She's served a great role for many films throughout, and for me, like I said, I'd like to think that again, if we're not counting Resurrection, I think that H20 was a great ending, and in my opinion, that was actually Laurie at her peak in terms of her ferocity and just like I like the way that they handled her trauma in that film. I actually like it more than I like it more in that film than the way they did it in the new trilogy. Just me personally. But yeah, like and we can also ask this in the same vein as like, well, Dr. Loomis, like the actor Donald Pleasance, he passed away after the release of Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. Did the films need him to survive? I mean, even though he was more or less an integral part of the plots for all films except for 3, but generally speaking, he was in pretty much every entry up until his death, and yeah, he was an integral part, trying to stop Michael, but like in the same way how like I think letting him go. And frankly, besides like that one sequence in Halloween Kills, I think that was like a nice callback to show his character and
Oh yeah.
The way that they redid the actor and they actually had the makeup and prosthetics
Beautiful
to make it look like Donald
flashback.
Pleasance was. I'm telling you, the sequence for that film that's my favorite part about Halloween Kills.
Oh,
that
yeah.
flashback is it's
I like
so
Halloween
damn beautiful.
Kills, but that was probably the best part.
Yeah.
I would watch a whole film like that.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm content with where I was kind of hoping that they would kind of do something similar in the vein of like Scream 5, where like we have the cast and like they can kind of, I don't know, like pass on the torch per se. It's kind of weird to say that because like like you're kind of like wondering like how long can these characters put up with the same shit over and over again, like
Yeah.
the same like the same ghost faces or different characters coming
Yeah,
back
same
constantly trying to find
situation.
reasons to, because in the previous films you could argue that the killers at least had a reason for why they were pursuing Sydney and whatnot, but like these new kids, like they're just victims of like some new ghost faces. But the point is that like I was okay with them passing on the torch to new characters, and I think if they want to bring Laurie back for one final entry, maybe if they were to do it this way and just somehow find a way to give her a great ending, but also make it so that it's not so unceremonious and pisses off the fans of Laurie Strode. I think they could find a way to.
So no
balance
Halloween
out.
Resurrection Part 2.
Yeah, no, or Halloween in space or something like that. Yeah, but yeah, no, my whole opinion is that like I don't need her anymore. I think she's paid her dues, like you guys said, and like if they really wanted to bring her back for like one final entry, it would probably just be a brief thing, just to say like love you guys, thank you for all you've done, and move on to some new, hopefully likable characters. That's where I would leave it at. But yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, at least in the Halloween community on Facebook, are kind of pushing for maybe Danielle Harris to return to the role of Jamie, since she got recast in Halloween 6. And as much as I enjoyed that film, the character of Jamie Lloyd got done a little dirty. And I don't know where they could kind of go with it, if they maybe come back from Halloween 4, like that ending, and do something there, or maybe 6 doesn't exist. I don't know what they could do. I know she's a fan favorite, and people really love that character, but I don't even know if you do that. I don't even know if you go back and include her, or just start fresh. Because there's already so many timelines. You know what I mean? So many like, does this connect? Does this connect? That maybe it's time for just a new timeline. A fresh start. And with a TV series, you could do even the anthology angle that John Carpenter originally wanted to do, which I think would be very fun. And maybe what if you threw in Michael for the season finale? Maybe you could do that. Still have your Michael and have your Halloween anthology fun in there as well. Don't know what the future of the franchise is, but I think clearly doesn't need Laurie Strode, or at least Jamie Lee Curtis is Laurie Strode. I think it's time for something new.
Yeah, no, it's oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm not talking about like the anthology like TV show and like you have Michael in there. It kind of harkens back to like the end of Halloween Ends, like evil doesn't die. It changes shape. That's an interesting premise, and I wish they would go that route, but I really feel like the studios are not going to want anything but Michael when it comes to Halloween, which is understandable because that's the tentpole of the franchise, but also just like, man, like Season of the Witch is so good. Like, yeah, it doesn't fit in anywhere with that franchise, but it's such a good story. I would have loved to have seen more like it. But what was you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, that unfortunately, what Chris was talking about with Halloween 4, I think that actually is also a legitimate thing to bring up, because, like, it would be two decisions for me, either to do the anthology angle or to go back to that timeline with Halloween 4 and maybe just try and rewrite some things, Because more or less Halloween 4, like the ending of that, like that's basically more or less what we got with Halloween Ends. Like that's more or less what we got, and that's why I think, despite the issues I have with it, and despite where it is in the new timeline, and even like being the final entry, it's frustrating because I see elements of like what that ending implied, but like obviously it's just done in a way that like like I don't think it would satisfy even some of the most diehard Halloween fans. So yeah, it's like I'm more open to doing the anthology angle because I really like Halloween 3. I know some people don't like that film whatsoever, and I don't know, if you take it on its own merits and just call it Season of the Witch, I think it's a perfectly fine and perfectly good Halloween film to watch during the month of October. Um, yeah, no, it is one of those things now, like we're like, going back to that thing, like, it's like, can you even really do the ending of Halloween 4 any more justice, or is it more worthwhile just to start a new timeline with a whole new cast of characters that no one's seen before, like no Dr. Loomis, no Laurie Strode, no Jamie Lloyd, all that stuff. That could be worth exploring too. But I mean, or maybe if they want to do this type of angle, like we're like in the TV show we were talking about, they could have like two dissecting timelines, like like one is with Michael and like the next would be like an anthology angle, and maybe like every other episode they would switch back between the different timelines, but it all takes place, like you said, within the same like world per se, and then like maybe by the end we could get the Michael Myers that everyone's asking for. So I don't know,
just have like Jamie Lee Curtis be the crypt keeper, like reading off stories of like different branching timelines. No,
Every
like
year he comes back.
yeah.
In '81, I had to kill him with 5 shovels.
Or we come to find out that like by the end of the show, like the show ends with Jamie Lee Curtis. She's like she takes off the mask and like she takes off the Michael Myers mask, and like it was her this entire time. Like I don't know where that would fit into the timeline, but that would throw everyone for a loop, I'm sure.
That would troll ending.
More polarizing than ends for sure.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was thinking about that, like as you was talking about possibly spinning off from like Halloween 4, like the timeline. Like you could say like Dr. Loomis freaking has a heart attack after seeing that, and like he like dies, and from just like the fear of the evil again, like being taking over this little girl. And what would you do with that? Like the premise after that, like would we follow her like in an asylum, and is she fully evil? Is she fighting it? Like, is she fighting the inner demon? Does the demon take over? Does it win? I think that'd be interesting to do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like if there's like some other, I don't want to say like a Man in Black because, that didn't really land that well. But what if there's like other forces out there that are like intervening because like just like the evil of Halloween, like just the the franchise, like the meat and potatoes of it is obviously Michael, but what controls Michael is just pure evil.
Right.
So like what kind of shape would that take?
And we do see like obviously in Kills like the influence that his like he inflicts upon the townsfolk. So like it's funny how like with Michael not even present, it still drives the townsfolk crazy enough to like turn against each other.
Yeah, after Michael disappeared for like what was it, 3 years, right? It's like
3-4 years, I think.
Yeah. And you have like a new character. I don't want to get like into like a lot of spoilers, but you have a new boogeyman because it seems like with that timeline, Haddonfield, like I'm sure like a lot of people have heard of like the Mothman of, like all of these like urban legends, like Bigfoot, stuff like that. I feel like that's like their urban myth. That's their thing, is the boogeyman will come out and get you. And I feel like if it's not Michael, it's going to be someone else in that town. Like there's always going to be a boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be something to fear.
Yeah, it's quite obvious Haddonfield was never the same after 1978. So
no,
yeah.
No, when the horny teenagers were murdered, nothing was ever fixed again.
Totally.
Right. Totally.
Speaking of totally, I didn't remember this, but there was a film I watched. It was called Candy Corn. I watched it a little bit before Halloween, and it had Tony Todd in it. And
not Children of the Candy Corn, right? Like
no.
Okay.
No.
She knows the Mothman.
Yep. Mothman. But yeah, it had Tony Todd in it. He was like a minor character. He played like a carny, but it also had like PJ Scholes, and she was like the dispatcher for like the little police department that they had in the film. And I don't know why that sprung in my head, but I'll share it now. But, yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Very nice. So, did you enjoy the film?
No, it was pretty bad.
Oh, okay. Dog rating. Like on a scale of like
Like
1 to 10.
the premise was interesting, I guess, but it was just like so. It was like I give it like a 4. Like it had some interesting premises. 4 out of 10. Not great, not good, but not terrible either. It's just kind of like that happened.
See, it's funny you mentioned that because like we're like getting out like a little off topic, but like I was thinking about like some of the movies I'm going to be doing for my Christmas marathon for the channel, right? And like someone actually recommended that I watch The Mean One because it was brought
Oh,
up in the conversation
yes.
that like the person who plays Art the Clown, which we'll get to later on, is he
Mhm.
plays the Grinch in that film. And I'm
Mhm.
like, is the film good? And he's like, absolutely not. I'm like, oh, great, that's fantastic, yeah. Like
That'd be really
not even like
entertaining.
a yeah, it's like some people like the kills can hold over people in kills, and like that's
Mhm.
I'm one of those people where like I can be entertained by that enough, but like some people like apparently they were saying that not even the kills were good enough to hold it over. I'm like,
Oh,
ooh,
man.
that's not
I'm
good.
sure David Howard Thornton does a good job as the mean one, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'm sure like everything else is kind of just rough
I
as
wouldn't
well.
hold it against him. Yeah, it's like you can only do so much with the material you're given, but
Yeah,
Hmm.
that is
yeah.
absolutely true.
So
Absolutely. And yeah, I guess with that, we'll move into the next topic.
great segue,
And
isn't it?
yes, yes. Um, this should be fun. I am the least knowledgeable on this topic, but we are going to talk about the Terrifier films and Art the Clown himself. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here. Terrifier 3. I have personally not seen it, but you two
Hmm.
have.
Hmm.
I've seen the first two. I think I like the second one better. I like both of them for different reasons, but people are saying that they get better. The more that they come out with the films, the better they're getting. And Art the Clown is starting to really be popular. Starting to see
Hmm.
him, at Scarefest. Well, I should have showed footage because I actually had some B-roll, and oh my god, every couple of seconds, every turn that you made, you seen Art the Clown. So
Hmm.
he is just skyrocketing at this point.
Hmm.
But let's talk about the films. What did you guys think of Terrifier 3?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, Terrifier 3. I got to see it with my buddy and my brother. We all my brother and I have been following the Terrifier films since the first one. I thought the first two were pretty good. The first one I think was a good proof of concept, and like it definitely had a lot of promise to it. The amount of practical effects and like obviously David Howard Thornton's performance as Art was worth it for the movie alone. But seeing the second one, they took obviously all that money that they got from the fans and fan funded it and made the movie a lot bigger. I think that the thing that holds back Terrifier 2, unfortunately, is that it does have a bit of a bloated runtime. But beyond that, I do think it is a better film than the first one in a lot of regards. But Terrifier 3 is actually, as of right now, because I've only seen it one time, it was definitely the one that I enjoyed watching the most. Not only, in my opinion, is this the funniest entry so far, but it still maintains what those two films did so well, just in a Christmas setting. I think that the Christmas setting obviously is a nice change of pace from the Halloween setting we're so used to. I like the colors. I like the kills and the variety of kills. I'm not someone who normally gets groused out by gore that often, but there was actually a kill in this movie that did make me go like, oh, because it actually was so gross. Yeah, like I won't talk about it because I want to save that surprise for Chris. I'm respectful in that way, but yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And another thing too that I like about each film is that it adds new things to the mythos while also it raises more questions, which I is both a love hate relationship because like I'm not saying that they should explain Art's origins and all that stuff away. I don't want to know everything there's to know about him, but like obviously he has some type of supernatural presence. But, like I'd be curious to know more about. But
Hmm.
as of right now, yeah, I had a good time with Terrifier 3, and I can't wait to watch it again. And I'm especially looking forward to watching it in December when it's like around Christmas time again. So I have nothing more to say. It was just a good time.
Yeah, I've got to watch Terrifier 3 twice now, and the uh, the the second time was kind of painful for me because nothing that the film did. I was like fighting a toothache, and like the third act can get a little loud, and just like my theater was like echoing, and my teeth were like vibrating. And I was like, oh my god.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, but man, those kills, like seeing those kills on a big screen, and like some of those gross out moments and stuff with the kills, like yeah, I'm not grossed out easy, and I was just more entertained than anything. But also, I would be kind of lying if I wasn't like ooh, with some of the stuff. But I think that's a big thing with Terrifier is that it's not afraid to push certain boundaries and to kind of cross that line, and that's what Damien Leone has said about Terrifier. Like there's certain lines that they won't cross, like Art's not going to like sexually assault somebody, and like they're not going to like focus heavily on like child murder, mutilation
Mhm.
type of things. But what they do show, like they're very creative with, and the some of the kills in Terrifier 3 are just like off the walls crazy.
I was, to add on to that, with the children kills, like there is like one kill that's done very early in the film that like you don't see it, you only see the aftermath, but the actual like sound design for the kill was still very effective. It's one of those things where like sometimes
Yeah.
what you don't see can be just as terrifying as what you do see, and I think it still managed to strike that balance between like being gross but also disturbing. But,
Yeah. And that's something that Terrifier's always kind of done with children deaths. They've has anybody seen All Hallows Eve?
Yeah, a long time ago.
I was gonna say I
Back in
actually
late
have
night
not.
Fright State.
Yeah, I have not.
Yeah, that was my introduction to Art the Clown before David Howard Thornton. I forget the guy's name, but he was Damien Leone's friend. Like he was like kind of like his guinea pig for like practical effects and stuff. And he played Art the Clown in is like a little anthology thing. But yeah, they've always been very open to like grossing you out and freaking you out, but also like very respectable when it comes to like certain things with like children. Like I don't think you're ever going to see Art like just like take a straight razor and like cut out a kid's eyeball or something. You're not going to see that. And
or scalp them. You're not going to see anything like that. No, like
no.
Yeah.
I think the worst you're going to get is like him like chewing on Jonathan's ankles in part 2.
Oh, dude, I had nightmares on that one.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I won't lie, that kind of just cracked me up, and I think it's supposed to. Just like imagine like waking up and this freak's just like chewing on your hand, and like you try to get away, and then he just goes for your ankles, like some kind of rabid animal.
Yeah.
Or Art's something else.
And if I was to add something real quick with what you're saying, them pushing the boundaries, I know that people have complained and said that the movies are too violent or too gory, and like the thing is, we've had violent movies like pretty much since the dawn of cinema. It's just that they've evolved throughout the years and like how gory they've gotten, and like
think back to Jaws. Like people were throwing up during Jaws.
Oh yeah, or and like for some people, if someone were to come up to me and say like, "Hey Matt, I think that the Terrifier movies are too gross and like they don't really add much substance to me. I'm gonna stick with something that's more that's like less violent, like maybe like I don't know I almost said Hatchet, but Hatchet's fucked up.
The Strangers.
Yeah, the Strangers. Something that's more like slow burn, doesn't have a whole lot of gore. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, if someone told me that, I'm like, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. On the flip side, I don't understand the argument that some people say like the movies are too violent, you should never watch these, and like these should be banned. I'm just like, if you don't care for them, then maybe they're just not for you. Like that's okay. It's okay to stick with things that are not violent. I understand that the idea of children being murdered in a movie is enough for some people to be just like no automatically, and I'm like that's totally fine. I totally get it. Just in the same way how like I'm not really interested in romantic comedies. I mean, like, am I gonna go out there with my pitchfork and try and change the format to my liking to make me more approachable to the form? Like, no, I'm just not going to watch them. So that's my whole take on the gore itself.
I would watch a rom-com with Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's. But yeah, I'm okay with the gore, like, because like I've been like watching horror films for like a long time, and like for me, whenever they push that boundary and they show new ways to kill someone, I get excited because like in a
Yeah.
day and age where everything is like CGI and like digitized to death, it's like it's nice and refreshing to see actual practical effects being done well
Something
again.
real, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
one thing I also want to say as well, like I gotta give a huge shout out to the makeup and costume designers because holy shit, Art is like half of his makeup is white, and I'm just like every single time he does like a scene with blood, I'm just thinking like he's probably thinking like, okay, time to get the white out. Let's redo it again, you know.
Oh
Like,
man, I didn't even think about that.
yeah, because like
Huge
like I'm
shout
sure
out.
it must take a long time to do all
Yeah,
that shit, and
I've
especially
heard
because
David Howard Thornton talk
imagine if they
about
did a
that.
take incorrectly, they would have to like reapply the makeup again. It's
Oh my god.
so that's
Yeah.
my take, yeah.
What's yours, Jeremy?
Uh, I'm just kind of getting PTSD to like the Walking Dead fan series now.
Oh yeah.
I've heard David Howard Thornton talk about like the blood continuity and stuff, and like having to retake scenes and stuff like that. But also like they leave and he has to get like the makeup on again, but also like every speck of blood that was on his face and going like down the side like from his ear or something, like all of that has to be like replicated perfectly, and that takes a lot of time
Yeah.
and a lot of effort, and they do it pretty seamlessly. So like yeah, kudos to them. It looks amazing. Like the continuity of those little details is like really good.
I would like to add, you were talking, Matt, about them pushing the boundaries, and a lot of people saying like, "Hey, this is too violent." Have you seen like half of the '80s slasher films?
Right.
Madman, The Burning, Maniac. I can go on and on. There is so many films that I've seen, and I've not seen the third one. Okay, so if I see the third one, I might be like, oh, maybe they did go too far. But what I seen was pretty good stuff that I enjoyed, I respected. But I have seen this on a similar level in the 80s. I mean, I feel like this happened back in the 80s where people were protesting and this is too violent. To me, it's cool to see creative ways and the way that they are doing these practical kills. That's what you mentioned too. Yeah, you can use CGI, but to practically make a kill look violent and good,
Hmm.
that's impressive. That's filmmaking. That's creativity at its finest.
It's one of the
And
best parts about Terrifier.
yeah, and that's why, me personally, I love slasher films because I want to see how they're going to, do this kill practically, and I want it to gross me out. I want it to be something that, I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And you guys were talking about, the kids and stuff like that and how they did that respectfully, and they should, that's a sensitive topic. But when it comes to grown adults, man, the 80s didn't care. And I mean, why should we care? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole point of watching the films for the most part.
Hmm.
Some
I
slashers lack story, and they're all about the kills and gore.
To add on to that, I think the reason like why this topic has come up into discussion again, because like
Hmm.
especially like with Terrifier and the fact that it's so violent, is that like yeah, sure. Admittedly, back then you had kills that like were pretty gory, but like you also had like a lot of films like Friday the 13th, for instance, was notorious for this happening. The MPAA would just, no pun
Oh, God.
intended, they would hack the fucking movies up and
Yes.
just take away all the gruesome, gory shots. Like Part Seven,
Part
like
7, dude. Yeah.
was they had like a lot of interesting kills behind the scenes. Like if you actually like looked at some of the behind the scenes footage, some of them looked amazing. Like and like I'm like I wish that they didn't do that. But I think the reason like why this topic is so much more prevalent now is because we also have to take into account that maybe I'm not getting this information correctly, but I remember reading some comments from people, and even Damien Leone probably has admitted to this. They said that the way that Art kills people is like too gory because it seems like he's keeping his victims in pain for as long as possible before they're dying. Like, whereas like slasher villains like, Freddy, Michael, and Jason, they kind of take out their victims in quote unquote fun ways.
Hmm.
They're more quick and to the point. Like he doesn't torture his victims like John Kramer from Saw. You know, and I think that's a fair point to make, though I still think that, like I said, in my opinion, if the tone is just too much for you, then maybe Terrifier specifically is just not for you. But
Yeah.
I'm okay with them making those bold decisions because I don't want there to be a repeat of the 80s and 90s with censored slasher films. They should be allowed to exist in some capacity. I think, because by actively saying you can't do this, it's too violent, you can't do that, it's too controversial, you're restricting and like choking the artists, and like I don't want to see that. I just, in the same way how like if you don't like a certain music artist, you can just not listen to their music. If you don't care for Terrifier, you can just move on to another slasher. There are plenty of other slashers out there that are more tame and they're more fun and campy, and like they're not too heavy on the gore. And I think that's like why you might like something like that. But, yeah.
Another thing that I'll add to this is a lot of it, I think, is also the age that we live in. It's easy for something to become a phenomenon. I feel like Art the Clown became like a social media phenomenon, especially like around conventions and everything. Like you said, Chris, like, every corner you turn, you kind of see cosplay of this character. And that's obviously going to feed intrigue. But there's also that flip side of the coin of, what if you're somebody that's like lived through some trauma? Like, I mean, it's hard to imagine a lot of people living through something like Terrifier, but just like something that could trigger that. I feel that that's like a big thing with it too. Like, like the backlashes, because Terrifier can be like, it's the same with any horror film. Like anything can like trigger trauma. But I feel like Terrifier might be easier to do that with just how brutal it can be. So it's like a flip side of the coin. Does it need to exist? Yeah, because, somebody had an idea for it. Is it going to please everybody? Is it going to be for everybody? Like, like we was talking about? No, it's not. And, everybody's going to have a bad experience and everybody's going to be reminded of something. And I don't feel like Terrifier should be the only thing to blame for stuff like that. But yeah, like if you have like easy, like, PTSD triggers and stuff, like, yeah, you don't need to be watching Terrifier. But in the same sense, it's art. And not the clown. It's just it's practical effects.
Yeah.
It's something that you kind of have to just remind yourself, like, nobody's actually dying. Like these people that are like making like signs and like protesting, like, nobody's dead, everybody's okay, just relax. It's like you was saying, Matt, like just listen to a different station, watch something that's more your cup of tea, put on a
Look at the
rom-com.
posters. Search
exactly.
an image of the movie, like watch a small trailer.
I mean, like, you're
And
gonna have like
figure
those
out.
trolls, like the Terrifier 3 teaser. Somebody like left a comment that was legit, like, I'm so glad that Art the Clown is getting like wider recognition. I hope families bring their children to come see this lovable
Oh,
clown.
man.
During
Yeah,
like
that might be a
this,
little too
during
far.
like
Bring the whole family. Just
yeah,
bring
it's
everyone.
like,
Yeah.
I'm glad that he's in a Christmas film that's gonna like bring the whole families together. Like, bring your children. He's such a sweet, likable character. I'm like, bruh.
Oh, like a Happy Tree Friends kind of situation. Like you're
Yeah.
lured in with a cute animation, and then you see like, and you're like, oh, okay.
My
Yeah.
thing is, and I know that John Wick's not as brutal, but I love how people are like, "Oh no, I hate horror films, but I love John Wick," or "I love brutal superhero movies where someone gets pummeled half to death." It's like,
Yeah,
come
like
on,
if you
man.
can see somebody get shot
Entertainment's
with like
entertainment.
explosive slugs,
You can see
yeah,
somebody get slashed up. It ain't no big
Yeah.
deal unless you're sensitive to it, and then I get that. I like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is pretty good, and then I like Ghost with Patrick Swayze. So
Like Poltergeist, yeah.
yeah, I like Poltergeist. I'm not too much of a big paranormal, when it comes to paranormal guy, like subgenre. I'm more of a slasher. She knows that, but yeah. Do you guys agree with the let's see, 77%? I'm guessing that's critic, and then 85% audience score.
For okay, so for
Terrifier
Icon
3.
for Terrifier the Ring. Oh, with the okay. I thought we were talking about the poll in the chat. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry.
Honestly, yeah. I there's actually a part of me that was kind of surprised that like the critic score actually wasn't lower, because I would have actually expected them to rate it lower. It's
Yeah.
Terrifier seems to be like one of those films like where I expect the audience score to be higher and the critic score to be lower. But same thing with like Joker. Joker was like praised by the audience, whereas like the critics were like they did not like it. So at least in terms of tomato scores. But Yeah, no, I'm content with where the film is sitting at in terms of. I don't really look at scores, if I'm being honest, too much. But I mean, I like to just judge the film based on like how I think. But that
Absolutely, that's the best way to do it.
So you're not a sheep,
I,
basically.
if you watch my movie reviews, I don't actually use any. I just make a summarization at the end. I don't use any numbers or number ratings or anything. So, but yeah, and also I think one more thing to add on to this, and it being the gore factor. It's like, look, if the first two films didn't do anything to change your mind as far as like watching them, then 3 is not going to do anything to change your mind either. So like, yeah, it's a small point, but I just think that like to add on to that, I think people they're like kind of like hoping to walk into this being like, oh, this shouldn't be like as gory as the first film. I'm like, no, it's in some ways even worse, but like,
yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. So, but I'm
How do you
content
feel
with it.
about that, Jeremy? About the audience and the critic score? Are you surprised with how neck and neck they are?
the critic score, I'm very surprised it's sitting at a 77 for sure.
It's went down to 72 as we speak.
Okay.
I'm joking.
But no, yeah, I'm surprised that it's actually that high coming from critics because, just because the clown is named Art, a lot of people aren't going to really see like that kind of filmmaking, the blood, sweat, practical effects, tears, like all that. They're not going to see that as like cinema. So I'm glad that it's at least somewhat decent on there. The audience score being in the 80s, I'm pretty happy about that. You know, it's definitely a fun film. I had a lot of fun, obviously, watching it in the theater. I had more fun looking at the people's expressions as they walked out of the theater.
I've heard that's one of the best parts about
It
seeing the
is
third film.
there was a few stories, and I can tell them here in a little bit if you'd like me to. But it was really cool, just like the different spectrums that you got from the moviegoers. So
Feel free to share.
okay, well, first off, there's like this couple. There's this guy and girl, and they both walked out, and like they both were like kind of pale in the face and like stone wall expression, but there was like something like, I'm not even trying to be dramatic. It looked like the innocence had left their eyes. Like there was like something missing in their eyes. They're kind of glossed, and I was like, well, that was fun, right? They were like, oh yeah, definitely a family friendly film. Like, yeah, definitely definitely should pop that in for Christmas or something like that. And then I was walking, and there's like some teenagers that probably like 17, 18, that were talking about it. It was like these just two buddies. They're like talking about how brutal the kills were and everything. And then I thought that was just going to be it. They're like, oh man, that was sick. This, and this. And then like the score, like from Terrifier 2, I feel like has a pretty good score, like the synthesized, notes and everything. And it's kind of like Sienna's theme, right? Like the synthesized notes. And you kind of get hints of that here and there through Terrifier 3. And they were actually like looking up Sienna's theme and like playing it, like, oh bro, I found it. And like they're like listening to like this like very 80s inspired music. And I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, you kind of had like the fans, and you had like the people that I feel like were going to be like in therapy over it. And just all in all, it was just a good time, man. It's one of those films that I could honestly see myself popping in at Christmas time if I'm like, hey, I want to watch a horror Christmas film. Like it's serviceable, like it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a Terrifier Christmas. I will let the horror fill my heart.
And not to mention, to go along with it, it's like I think some people also undermine how, like, some people only talk about the gruesome moments and like the kills, but I'm like there are moments in this movie that had my entire theater erupting with laughter. Like I think some people really don't give credence to the fact that these movies actually can also be kind of funny. I mean, like, like even before there are any kills, I mean, like, just Art's mannerisms and like how he carries himself, and like
Oh
how he
yeah, for
like the lack
sure.
of talking. Like, there are some really funny moments that I think some people just don't. Again, I want to talk about them, but I'm trying to save them for Chris's enjoyment. But there are some really funny moments that had
Like
like
the
they're the
hallway
ones like
scene.
yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
there's like this whole bar scene, like yeah, that was
Oh,
hilarious. But
hmm
I don't want to talk about it. But like, oh my god, it was like and keep in mind, I had like a theater experience like where it was like packed, and I had people from all different walks of life. There were teenagers, there were people in my age, there were people in like their middle ages, beyond. And everyone was just having a good time. I don't remember seeing many people like going like oh or like walking out. I think it just really comes down to like who you are, and like like I said, there's a good chance that a lot of these people walked into this movie knowing exactly what it was going to be like, myself included, and just had a good time with it. And yeah, that's just like one of those like underrated things about this movie is just the comedy as well. It's got some really funny moments, and yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I know. Whenever I watched, I guess even both films, the way like Art's mannerisms had me cracking up. I know some of it's not supposed to be funny, but it is crazy how you can be laughing and then the next scene he's doing something diabolical, and
right.
you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like the whole pizza shop scene in the first movie, like how he just has like this
hmm
like like dead
Yeah,
look on his face, like that
yeah,
shit
doing
is
all this
creepy
stuff.
as hell. But like like then there's like a whole scene like where he's just like he's like laughing without actually making it's just he's almost like the Joker, just like how like he's a person that you're clearly not supposed to like, but you just kind of do like
You can't help
inadvertently.
but like him.
Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
And well,
His dream
it's
role,
perfect.
actually, too. David Howard Thornton's dream
Is-
role to be
I
the
remember reading
Joker.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, let's talk about Art. Do you guys think that he is now a modern horror icon, or does he still have a little bit of ways to go? Because I mean, he's obviously took off in popularity.
Definitely seems like he's kind of attained like a like cult status. I mean, like
hmm
I can't quite gauge just how popular. It definitely seems like Terrifier has become like kind of like the new slasher on the street. Like he's not quite there on the Mount Rushmore of like the Freddys and the Jasons and the Michaels, but like you can see he's kind of getting that way, slowly but surely.
Oh
And
yeah.
like I said, for me, he kind of entered an iconic stage after the second one, just because of how popular the Indiegogo campaign was, and seeing how people were excited for this film, and people were coming in droves to the movie theater to go watch it. And now this time around for Halloween, I remember actually seeing quite a few people dressed up as Art, and I'm like, okay,
hmm
to me, like that, like when people actually start dressing up as the character, that to me submits him as being more of a pop culture phenomenon. So at least that's how I see it. But
Yeah, I feel like, there's still a little bit of the road to kind of to go before definitively, yes, he's a horror icon, but I feel, for some people he's probably already on their Rushmore. Is he on my Rushmore? Probably not. No. Could he get there? Definitely. It just depends on how the story unfolds. We got like what, one or two more films supposedly with this plot, the Art the Clown, everything, as long as Damien actually ends it
yeah,
with like four or five. So yeah, it's definitely up in the air. He's definitely a pop culture phenomenon. I feel like this is probably what we would have experienced if social media had existed the way it did back in the 90s with Scream. This is honestly, this could be like the making of a horror icon of the 2010s, you know,
hmm
is how I see it. And I'm all for it, give us more horror icons, because that just gives credence to more horror films that we can enjoy. I mean, look at Freddy and Jason, like production hell for like all these years.
Oh yeah.
Like
oh yeah.
we need something. Like give us something. So
Jason goes back to space, please. Yeah, or something.
I mean,
Jason takes a boat too. Yeah.
everybody was so excited for Michael to come back in Halloween 2018, and look how quickly it's like, oh, okay, we're back to the same routine. I
hmm
mean, and even Ghostface, I know some people are, not very happy with Scream 6. I personally think it's all right. I didn't mind it. Um, some people are getting bored already, two, maybe three films into, like, bringing these horror icons back. but now creating new ones like Art the Clown, which I would probably agree. I've not seen the third film. I wouldn't say he's on my Mount Rushmore, but in terms of like a modern horror icon, I mean, he has to be the hottest one right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can think of some other people, but like he's really getting good reception, and it's cool to see a horror film, a slasher film, a slasher icon kind of thrive in
Yeah,
this
I
day
feel
and
like
age.
it's
That isn't,
deserved.
yeah, that isn't somebody that we had to bring back, for nostalgia reasons. It's cool to see
Yeah,
one get created right in front of us, and that's
Yeah.
yeah.
awesome. And I would love to see more of that, more
I mean,
originality.
yeah, even if you take films like Eli, like just for example, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, like
Yes.
John Carver, like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of interesting to see like a holiday themed icon turned into like a slasher. I thought that was an interesting thing, and like like
Yeah.
setting it around Thanksgiving, being in Plymouth, Massachusetts, like I think for some people. He's not really like super iconic. Obviously, like, he's only had like one film, but I think the look and like the way he carries himself in that film is like simplistic, and it kind of takes me back to like those older like slashers, like
Yeah.
even like it reminded me like a lot of Scream with Ghostface, like how quick he is, how like vicious he is. I mean, like I liked it. And I'm curious to see like what they do with Thanksgiving too, just for that
Oh,
reason
me
alone.
too.
I would like to see, because I had my issues with Thanksgiving, but I do think it was
Mm.
a fairly entertaining movie overall. And
Especially some of the
yeah,
kills were very fun.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I had a blast watching that in theaters. Me and my girlfriend did. I'm really excited for Thanksgiving too.
hmm.
I'm
Is that
excited.
any way
I'm
to talk
excited
about
for the actual
Kathleen? She's been
Thanksgiving.
cooking all day.
You mentioned kind of like the similarities with Ghostface. Doesn't John Carver even use like a voice changer in the film? Or at least I
he
think.
he used it during one sequence
Yeah,
because
like in the table, like
besides like
dinner
the rest of
table.
the movie, he does not talk. I don't think so.
Right.
He makes like grunt noises and whatnot, but obviously that's to be expected. But yeah,
Mhm.
um, yeah, yeah,
Unless you're Art the Clown, then you're completely silent.
right, right.
Man, I mean, I hate to cut it short. We're right at an hour. I've done multiple polls, which thank you guys for voting in the polls. Um, I mean, this is other than the intro debacle. I think this has went fairly well. Like I said, we're at an hour right now. I feel like I could go on for two more if we wanted to, but we kind of ran out of topics. So we all kind of agree that Jamie Lee Curtis, she doesn't need to come back. They need to do something new with the Halloween series. And the Terrifier films, they're pushing the envelope, but I mean, maybe some people are overreacting and it's not really their bag. And then that Art the Clown, I mean, is on his way, if not already, a modern day horror icon. And David Howard Thornton does such a great job. I didn't get to say this. And from everything I've seen of him, uh, people interacting with him, like fans and stuff like that, I'm kind of upset that I didn't meet him back when he was at Scarefest last year. But I really didn't watch the Terrifier films then. So
Yeah,
kind of a missed opportunity, but he seems like a genuine guy. And
I
just for
love watching
everybody,
him like go around
do the
Spirit
reviews.
Halloween and stuff,
Oh,
or
I've not
just
seen
like
that.
yeah, there's like that, and there's like his this one he's like waiting at a for an elevator, and he's got like security like escorting him and stuff because it's like a convention,
Yeah.
and there's like he's got like the horn and he honks it at like this little kid, and the kid like freaks out. And he's like, and like he turns it around and he's like offering it to the kid. He's like, and the kid backs up and he's like, enough
Oh.
said, and kind of just does his own thing. But he's just he's really disarming, and his body language and stuff, like you can definitely tell he took a lot of inspiration from like some of the late great silent film stars that were
Oh yeah,
relied on
absolutely.
their
Body
actions to
language.
speak for themselves. So yeah,
Mhm.
definitely a very talented man.
It's a really hard thing to do. I think some people misunderstand like how hard it is actually to do that. I mean, think about someone
Underrate
like
that.
I went to actually talk about it briefly, but like Peter Weller with like RoboCop,
Oh
you
yeah.
don't see you only see like his mouth, and like think about how hard it is to like
Mm,
you're moving in like this like awkward suit, so like you have to find ways to make it you have to make it unique, and like he does talk, but like how do you make it sound cool without making it sound like robotic? No pun intended, but
right.
It crazy how David Howard Thornton, though he doesn't speak, in the role, has such personality. You know what I mean? That's kind of unique, because you have Michael and Jason who are mute, but their personality, it is, somewhat their body language. But when I think of Art the Clown, I do kind of think he has a little bit of a personality, at least the way he performs his art, quote unquote.
Hmm.
see he takes great pleasure in it, even though he doesn't vocally, express that,
Oh yeah.
which is kind of a unique take. And like you mentioned, that has to be extremely hard. And for David Howard Thornton, I bet it's just crazy to become, like I said earlier, like a modern day horror icon.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, the dude seems very down to earth. And I wish I could have got to meet him. Maybe there's a next time in the future. But man, it's a great time to be a horror fan, man. You got
Oh
It
yeah.
really
Terrifier
is.
fucking
Oh yeah.
burning it up. I mean, Thanksgiving too, which is like next year. I'm pretty sure. I
I
can't
think
wait
so.
for that.
Yeah.
A lot of cool stuff, man, on the horizon. But again, I hate to cut it short. We're at an hour. Before I do this, I just want to show this. God, this is so slow. I want to shout out Matt's channel. If you guys are watching this live or on the
Oh,
replay,
thanks.
definitely go subscribe to him. He does great content. I don't know how many months ago we met, but it was really cool kind of meeting through like a mutual like appreciation of a YouTuber, and to just kind of watch you grow, especially those last two videos, man. You killed it. Great to
Thank
see
you.
that results from you, and very, no problem, man. And just very happy to have you on here. And Jeremy, I don't have yours up. I know that you kind of don't do it as much anymore.
Is it
I'll
Jeremy with
shout
like a Y?
yours out
Like Jeremy
next
with a
time.
Y, or like with a
It should be.
WHY.
It should be.
Yeah.
It's whatever you need it to be.
But love to have
Yeah.
you back here again, Jeremy. Especially like we talked about, Scary Movie would be a fun one to cover. There's a lot of news coming out, and we both love that film. But yeah, I mean, what else do I gotta say? Not much more. But I want to redo on this damn Candyman intro, so I'm gonna solo it real quick. Let me redo this, okay? All right. Make sure I have it all here. We have lost a horror icon, Tony Todd.